A few weeks ago, I resigned my job to start a new tech company that has something to do with creatives working in the cloud. It's week 2, and I'm feeling a lot better now because thankfully, I have help. My brother Peter decided to leave his role at Netflix and join me as CFO and general manager, as did our cousin Austin, an incredibly gifted full stack engineer who I've previously worked with. Together, we're trying to build a startup. We're doing it in my living room, and we're setting up cameras so we can capture our experiences as they are happening. Being unemployed is a strong motivator now for all of us, which is also likely contributing to the stress.
Not workflow.
That is workflow.
Well, I'm gonna argue it's not our workflow.
The problem we're solving isn't defining what workflow is.
Yeah, but if you want to have any engineer come in here and understand this, you have to be able to define this, and you can't say
I defined it.
You can't say it's to and from.
Why? At this stage, when I think of the word startup, all I see is a stack of problems stretching like the size of the Matterhorn. And every morning when I wake up, it seems like one of these problems punches me in the face. But when faced with overwhelming amounts of problems, we often find ourselves ensnared in decision fatigue. Why is it that when you have an idea, but haven't yet acted upon it, knowing where to start can be so elusive? So we decided to make our own startup to-do list by identifying an end goal and working backwards to create a checklist of tasks needed in order to get our product moving. So beginning at the end, our goal is to create some form of a cloud workflow tool that has some form of AI in it and deliver some form of a product sometime before the end of next year. I honestly don't know yet what that product is or how it works or how much it costs or exactly who it's for. All I know for sure is that we have to build an app that lives in the cloud. But in order to build that, we need to build an application that lives on a website. In order to build that, we need to buy a website. Before we can do that, we need to hire engineers and designers to make that website. Before we can hire them, we need to figure out how many people it will take to do it. To determine that, we need to know how much these people will cost. To generate a budget, we need to determine how much money they make. Before we offer compensation, we need to determine how much money we have. To spend money, we need to raise money. To raise money, we need to create a business pitch. To pitch a business, we need to have a mission and vision. To have a vision, we need to tell a compelling story using a deck. To make a deck, we have to become experts in the structure of pitching. A structured pitch requires someone to believe this idea is worth investing in, which means we need to identify a real problem worth solving. And that's the start. Any business that requires buy-in from anyone else starts with this. State the problem and ask, is this problem worth solving? And are we the people to solve it? And the truth is, right now, we don't actually have a problem statement yet. In fact, we keep coming back to this over and over. I think finding a problem statement is a lot harder than it sounds. Writers and directors often write these great stories, but have you ever noticed that if you ask them to summarize it, they easily get hung up? Not because they don't know the material, in fact, quite the opposite. They know the material so well, it can be hard to shrink it down and share it to a stranger using only a couple sentences. Entrepreneurs know what it's like to sit next to a family member during the holidays and you struggle to explain to them what you do for a living, or even make it sound interesting. Ever had an idea you're incredibly passionate about, and when you're ready to risk it all, you tell the idea to your best friend and the response is an underwhelming, cool. I think creatives, entrepreneurs, and business owners know their craft so well, making it both concise and compelling is just plain hard. In fact, it's taking us a long time to figure it out. We don't yet have a product plan. We don't even have a company name. We don't have a budget. We don't have enough money or a roadmap. But what we do have is a suspicion that AI is going to disrupt the landscape so much that we are willing to leave the safety of our jobs so we can figure out how we can use AI to help creatives make better content. So after some painful resignations at jobs we enjoyed and excelled at, we decided to meet in my living room, set up some cameras, and record ourselves for countless hours trying to figure out how we're going to make a living. I hope that by recording this story, we may be able to help anyone who's thinking about building something of their own, be it a product, a business, or a project. We don't yet know how this ends, which could go horribly wrong. That could be an upside for you because you get to watch us go back begging for our old jobs. We are not experts in startups, but my brother and I have done something like this before, and we learned a lot through our mistakes. So this is just our version of building a business, which means there's another upside for you, and that is you can take part in our vision, learn from our mistakes, and hopefully apply some of our takeaways to your own projects. Plus, since we're aiming to build a product for creative people, we're going to ask for your feedback, your insight, your comments, and your criticisms. We are not sure exactly what we're going to do yet, but it should be interesting to watch. Which brings us back to the problem. Well, the best way for us to figure out what to do is one of my favorite things: talk and tinker. I cannot overstate how important it is to spend time without an agenda and just talk and tinker. I bet you're like me, that you've been part of teams that are run by people who are timekeepers and they're policing the agenda. They are so married to the clock and an agenda that they fail to make time for discovery or inspiration or even debate. This is a plague in business, especially ones that lean remote. When I'm in charge, allowing for unchecked talking and tinkering is always worth the risk of wasting a little time. So Pete, Austin, and I just sat there and talked and tinkered, talked and tinkered, talked and tinkered, tinkered and talked. The fact that you're essentially beholden to the roadmap of the tool you've chosen to be your center of gravity.
How many more customers are literally in one-person shop? Someone who's a do-it-yourselfer would pay to have their process automated, so now they don't have to do as much work.
We gently corral people into cloud workflow without overwhelming them with this AI stuff, especially since AI is still a 4-letter word.
That means I could get $500 of usage out of my app, and I don't have to do a thing.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Transform might be a safer word. Well, how are you transforming it? You tell me.
Right? Because if you have an AI assistant, but you're the creative.
This is an industry first.
Sure.
No one's put all that together. And eventually, like archaeologists with a toothbrush in the sand, we began to expose a problem. One of the other problems is that AI tools are discombobulated and disconnected. Marketplaces have an ability to organize emerging markets.
What if we actually turn it into 2 sentences? And the nice thing I like about that is it has nothing to do with the solution.
The whip stage of pre, prod, and post is not in the cloud. Then we showed our problem statement to our friend Nick Masheri, who gave us some really good feedback.
Why should anyone do this? Like, I get it, they're compromising their vision, but even this feels less sharp than it could be.
Okay.
How are they compromised? What's the clearest crystallized statement of, here's the problem, we're the solution?
And after talking and tinkering for weeks, we finally realized something. Tools built for creative professionals are vast, complex, and highly fragmented, which leads to increased costs, wasted time, and compromised results. As the universe of AI tools and creative professionals expands, this problem only gets worse. And that's it. That's our problem. And it's not just our problem, it's your problem too. If you're working more and more in the cloud, then you're using more and more cloud services, which means your assets are being spread out over more and more cloud subscriptions, which means you're paying for them at more and more random times. That's a problem. And you're probably noticing Instagram ad after Instagram ad of new AI solutions. And if you're like me, you're curious about them. So you sign up for 1, then 2, then 3. But to use 3 AI tools, you have to move files up and down across 3 cloud tool sets. To get the result you want, you now have 3 versions of the same file, all fragmented across an already messy desktop. That's a problem. Somehow these tools enable you to do more cool work, but at the cost of being less organized? That's a workflow problem. We are convinced that this is a problem we're solving. And there are 2 parts to that equation, if you remember. The second one is, are we the right people to solve it? Well, one way to determine whether or not we are the right people is to look into our past. So for me, it all started at Southern Illinois University. In 1999, when along with some friends, I created a half-hour entertainment docuseries called Alt News 2646. At the time, analog tape was the standard, but we discovered this thing called FireWire and coupled it with DV Cam, the Sony PD150, and Apple computers and Final Cut Pro version 1. We didn't know it at the time, but digital technology allowed us to box way above our weight class. And the work we did cutting class ended up winning us top awards at the college festival circuits, as well as winning 5 regional Emmys. The first problem we solved was discovering how digital technology increased our speed, our production value, and our storytelling style compared to the then analog tape standard. Then, After moving to LA, I worked as an editor for the director Christopher Coppola and eventually founded Plaster City Digital Post, which was a post-production branch of his production company focused exclusively on digital cinema. And in 2003, the standard was still film. In fact, bragging about digital was extremely uncommon. I actually remember one industry leader that drove me nuts when he spearheaded a campaign that said, "If you don't shoot film, you're not a filmmaker." But by 2009, I founded Light Iron with my brother Peter. And there we focused on 4K file-based workflows. Back then, the standard was still videotape, and companies like Red were outsiders. But our file-based cinema workflow expertise landed us on jobs like the original Avatar, Pirates 4, and The Social Network. And then we took our tech and mobilized it and built the first available fleet of mobile post-production stations which feature films could rent internationally. At the time, post was only brick and mortar. Today, mobile file-based post workflows are a standard. Then in 2015, Light Iron was acquired by Panavision, where I shifted my focus to acquisition. We teamed up with Jared Land at Red and built the first 8K studio camera system called DXL. Our goal was to make large format video capture more accessible. DXL was an easy camera to use because it was a studio body with lots of ports and choices and was able to combine a large format sensor with a ProRes workflow. Back then, the idea of large format optics and 8K resolution was considered unnecessary or imperceptible. Now it's a standard. After DXL took off, I wanted to take acquisition to the next level and connect cameras to the cloud. A fellow entrepreneur, Emery Wells, started the company Frame.io right about the time I joined Panavision, and we kept in touch. And in 2019, we teamed up, and together we began pioneering a way to solve another problem: how you can shoot from cameras right into the cloud. And today, cloud acquisition is well on its way to becoming a standard workflow practice by 2030. I love workflow. I love it. I love it because it's so hard to get right. I've dedicated my life to trying to make workflow better for filmmakers and done so on more than 150 feature films. I have always been an early adopter of new technologies: analog to digital, SD to HD, tape to files, HD to 4K, on-prem to mobile, SDR to HDR, 4K to 8K, and camera to cloud. And I'm one of the best in the world at deploying these technologies to up-level workflow. Which brings us to why I decided to resign. I believe that there is a new workflow opportunity brewing for content creators, and it's something that I want to bring to the masses. Consider this. What if the biggest transformation to creatives brought on by machine learning wasn't generative AI? What if it's workflow automation? What if the future of workflow is a set of intelligent, automated utilities that are triggered the moment you hit record? What if workflow was so automatic and intelligent, you never have to have a workflow meeting ever again? What if workflow automation could be so precise that eventually you would never wait for it, you'd never interact with it, you'd never even see it? We just realized that the future of workflow isn't about being able to configure it. It's not about being an expert in it or simplifying it. The future of workflow is about erasing it. We've identified a problem we're solving with a transformative technological landscape. Between Austin, Peter, and myself, we have already spent tens of thousands of hours on workflow prior to today. So we're the type of people who might be able to do this. The past couple weeks have been very exciting. And even though we don't know what we're gonna do just yet, we agree. AI-enabled cloud workflow is a problem we want to try and solve. Now, if we only knew what to call it.